How did countries get free after 1900? Imagine if you were under control of a distant empire, with your country's decisions made by outsiders. After World War II, people decided they wanted their independence. But how did they go about it? Let's explore some of their stories. In India, leaders from the Indian National Congress wanted freedom from British rule. They used negotiations and peaceful protests, led by figures like Mahatma Gandhi. Their efforts paid off, and in 1947, India became independent. This is an example of freedom through negotiated independence. Gandhi used non-violent civil disobedience, mass protests, and hunger strikes to put moral and economic pressure on the British. Gandhi famously said, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." But not all countries followed this peaceful path. In Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh led a fight against French control. This struggle involved intense warfare and bloodshed. After years of conflict, Vietnam finally gained independence in 1954. This is an example of independence through armed struggle. The First Indochina War, 1946 to 1954, featured guerrilla warfare and significant battles like the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. The Geneva Accords in 1954 officially ended French colonial rule in Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh declared, "Nothing is more precious than independence and liberty." Another story comes from Africa. In the Gold Coast, now Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah led the push for independence from British rule. He used a mix of protests and political pressure. By 1957, Ghana became the first African country to gain independence through negotiations. Nkrumah organized strikes and boycotts and formed the Convention People's Party, CPP, to rally public support and pressure the British government. The 1948 Accra Riots were significant in the push for independence. Nkrumah's efforts set the stage for other African nations to seek independence. He proclaimed, "We face neither east nor west, we face forward." Unfortunately, like many of these leaders, he was caught in the path of the Cold War. In contrast, Algeria fought a brutal war against the French. The Algerian War of Independence lasted from 1954 to 1962 and involved significant violence. This is another example of freedom through armed struggle. The conflict saw widespread use of guerrilla tactics by the National Liberation Front, FLN, and French counterinsurgency operations. The Battle of Algiers, 1956 to 1957, was the key conflict within the broader War of Independence. The Evian Accords in 1962 formally ended the conflict and led to Algerian independence. Gamal Abdel Nasser led Egypt's quest for independence. In 1952, he helped overthrow the king and push the British to leave. Egypt achieved its independence through a blend of negotiation and force. The Free Officers Movement, which Nasser was a part of, staged a coup, abolished the monarchy, and nationalized the Suez Canal, which led to the withdrawal of British forces after the Suez Crisis in 1956. Nasser's policies focused on modernizing Egypt and asserting its sovereignty on the global stage. Nasser once said, "The genius of you Americans is that you never make clear-cut stupid moves, only complicated stupid moves, which make us wonder at the possibility that there may be something to them which we are missing." Other regions had different challenges. The Muslim League in British India, led by figures like Muhammad Ali Jinnah, sought a separate nation for Muslims, which resulted in the creation of Pakistan in 1947. The demand for Pakistan stemmed from concerns over Muslim minority rights in a Hindu-majority India. The 1947 partition led to mass migrations and significant violence. The Quebecois separatist movement in Canada, driven by cultural and linguistic differences, pushed for greater autonomy and recognition of French-Canadian identity, which led to significant political changes, though not full independence. The movement saw the formation of the Parti Québécois and referendums in 1980 and 1995, which both narrowly failed but led to increased recognition of French language rights and greater provincial autonomy. The Biafra secessionist movement in Nigeria, driven by ethnic tensions and economic disparities, declared independence in 1967, which led to the Nigerian Civil War, 1967 to 1970, and a humanitarian crisis before reintegration into Nigeria. This movement resulted in a horrible civil war, with millions of casualties, largely due to famine, and highlighted the deep-rooted ethnic divisions in Nigeria. Beyond the regions already discussed, decolonization efforts occurred in many other parts of the world. In South America, countries had gained independence from European powers in the 19th century, but the 20th century saw movements for social and economic justice, often leading to significant political changes. In Southeast Asia, countries like Indonesia fought against Dutch colonial rule, achieving independence in 1949 after a series of violent conflicts. Sukarno in Indonesia proclaimed independence in 1945 and led the country through a struggle against Dutch colonial forces until 1949's formal recognition. Malaysia negotiated its independence from British rule in 1957. In sub-Saharan Africa, countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and many others experienced both negotiated independence and armed struggles. For instance, Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya led the country to independence from British rule in 1963 through both political negotiations and the Mau Mau uprising. Nelson Mandela in South Africa fought against apartheid, leading to the country's transition to majority rule in 1994. To analyze the long-term impacts of these movements on modern geopolitics provides context for their significance today. The end of colonial rule led to the formation of new nation-states, many which have struggled with issues of governance, economic development, and national identity. Former colonies play significant roles in global organizations like the United Nations and the African Union, and advocate for issues such as decolonization, economic development, and human rights. The legacy of colonial borders and policies contributes and contributed to ongoing conflicts and challenges in regions like the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. So what do these stories tell us? They show that the fight for independence can take many forms, from peaceful negotiations to bloody battles. And here's the twist. The path to freedom often depended on the leaders and their strategies. Some chose peace, while others found that only war could bring about change. But in the end, the goal was the same: freedom. These movements reshaped the global political landscape, ended centuries of colonial rule, and inspired future generations to fight for justice and equality. To understand the complex political and social context of these movements helps us appreciate the sacrifices made and the impact of their struggles.